Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dad's on Life, your weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts Keith Bogan
Yo.
and Doug Hemedike.
Good morning.
Chad is, we've sent him on assignment. He is apparently currently en route. No, I'm kidding. Chad is on his way to Colombia to see his family. He hopefully will join us from there next week. But we'll see. We'll try to work that out. Ironically, him being in Colombia kind of has a little bit of works its way
now, do not go there. That's not what we wanted to talk about today.
because of the source of what we're going to be talking about, some of it at least. Anyway, we're going to be talking about basically earlier this week, LeBron James, the obviously legendary basketball player, going to be Hall of Famer. His 15-year-old son posted a video of himself accidentally. I would say he isn't wrong about that. He didn't put it up on purpose, of him apparently smoking a joint. We're going to get into, at 15. There's, in this day and age, being where he is, there's only one real argument that you could say he was wrong on, and the fact that he's underage. That's about it. That's the climate we live in right now. Marijuana is legal in California, where he lives, so that's the only. It's essentially the same thing as underage drinking when it comes to the law itself. So we're going to take off from there and go into, obviously, drugs and underage drinking, stuff like that. Who wants to take off?
Oh, I'll jump all over that stuff because, firstly, the dumbest thing he did wasn't smoking a joint, wasn't doing it as an underage kid. The dumbest thing he did was having it recorded.
Right.
I mean, and this betrays the fact that he's 15. I don't care if he's the son of the king of the world.
Right.
I mean, who records stuff like that? That's just insane. Should he have been doing what he did? Probably not. But it just blows my mind, and why I railed against social media for years. I mean, obviously now I'm finally on Facebook and I'm rather verbose on it. But I mean, until about 4 years ago, I wasn't even on Facebook, and I just thought anything in social media was the worst horrible thing in the world. And this is a prime example of it. I know we're not here to talk about social media. We're here to talk about underage drinking, underage drugs, stuff like that. But I just had to get on my soapbox for a minute and say that this is what's wrong with social media, among other things. With that said, I think our conversation about, as it relates to our own kids, will be a completely different universe, because the son or offspring of LeBron James probably feels it can do anything. The sons and daughters of famous people behave differently than the sons and daughters that we have.
Yes.
Because we are not yet famous. Maybe later, but not yet, And so they do things that whatever they feel like, and even if there are legal implications, it'll get brushed under the rug. We know how society works.
But to be fair, so would underage drinking. It's
right. Oh yeah. Well, they do whatever they want. It doesn't really matter.
It's a misdemeanor.
The whole thing about paying for the famous people paying for their kids to bypass test scores and get their way into college, really good colleges that they didn't deserve to be. And most, we keep hearing about Lori Loughlin, I think her name is.
Yes. Loughlin.
But there's probably hundreds or thousands of famous people who are currently doing that for their kids, and we're not hearing any of that stuff. It's all getting brushed under the rug.
Yeah, Felicity Huffman as well.
Yeah, so the two names,
yeah,
big deal, two names, but it's rampant. It's been rampant since the beginning of time, and they just decided to pick on two people.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Even if they picked on 100 people, it would never make up for all the stuff that they've ignored over the many years.
Right.
So the topic of any famous athlete or famous person's kid doing anything wrong um, is only an entree for us to talk about how we raise our kids and what we do in terms of teaching them about things like alcohol and drugs and other topics. And in this house, it's just interesting. I grew up in a house where my father was the leader of one of the major political parties for our township and very, very influential in statewide politics. He never ran for office, but he was always the guy behind the scenes running the whole show.
Right.
And in our house, we had a full bar. And
Sure.
when I say full, I mean we had 400 bottles of hard alcohol. And we would throw these massive political parties in our house on a regular basis.
Right.
We would have 100 people, a lot of politicians. It was insane. And I grew up in this environment. And when you grow up with that much alcohol around you, you don't care. I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and Dad finally looked at me and said, "Is there anything you'd like to try?" And I had no idea. I always had a sweet tooth, so I said something sweet. So he came out with this thing. You probably know Sherry Monnier. It's some kind of liqueur, and I had a couple of tastes, and it was okay. It was interesting, but I could have gone to that bar anytime I wanted to and done anything I wanted to when my parents were around. And I never did. I never cared. In fact, I would clean it sometimes when they weren't around, and I would ignore the alcohol. I remember the first time I got drunk I was 14, and it was at one of those parties. And it taught me not to touch alcohol again until I was 18 because I got so hammered. It was horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents were the kind, and I probably very much like us, were okay, if you want to try something, try it in the safety of the house. Drugs were never even a topic. My parents never talked to me about drugs at all. And this goes all along. We were raised very straight-laced in an environment where we didn't think about tattoos or piercings or anything like that. Drugs weren't something that was even an option. Alcohol was so widely available that nobody even cared. And none of us touched the alcohol. I mean, I know from talking to my 3 brothers, they didn't touch it either. I have 4 brothers, and none of us cared. And likewise, so with my boys, they've always known that if they wanted to try something, I would be more than happy to provide it, and they never did. Right. Neither one of them touched any alcohol until they got to college. And I've yet since my younger one is a freshman at OSU to confirm whether or not he's actually finally tried something. Although I'd be really shocked at this point if he had. I think Elvis has had alcohol. Would you say that? No, never mind. That's
he needs some.
Yeah, I mean, Justin has gone on to definitely enjoy himself as a senior. He's just 21 years old, and he goes to parties, and he likes to drink beer and all that. But yeah, neither one of them had an interest in alcohol until they left high school. Neither one of them, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think either one of them had any experimentation with drugs. And we talked about drugs a lot in the household and the implications and whether or not they were good or bad. And I'm actually pretty much a supporter of marijuana, so not necessarily using it, but I'm not against. I don't think it should be. And they don't have tattoos, they don't have piercings, and I think that's permanent. I don't think they'll ever touch that stuff. But they're also young, so we'll see how it goes. But unlike a lot of friends that they grew up with, I think our environment was very open to it. We could talk about it, we could debate the pros and cons, but they weren't only allowed to experiment with alcohol until while they were, if they were here, and they chose not to. They were not allowed. We always told them piercings, tattoos, absolutely not. But if you want to do it after 18, do whatever you want. And I don't think they will. It's just not. It's not the way any of us think in our family. I've never had either of them, and I probably never will.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I rambled there a lot.
That's okay. I'm going to read Chad did send a statement. I'm going to read that real quick. Uh, I'm a big believer in teaching kids how to drink and letting them get fucked up at home rather than having them out and about. I remember being in Italy and a young girl, I guess 12, had a birthday party. All the kids were drinking wine, and it was completely normal. No big deal was made. And now with pot, it used to be something to on make on crazy. Not now it's legal here for recreational use. Again, no problem with this. The issues are safety and addiction for me. Um, Statements that I largely agree with. I think all of us probably do. Doug, you want to take a run at this?
Yeah, I was mostly didn't really think about the drugs part. As we're talking now, I kind of was thinking about it a little bit more. But I just think that like all alcohol and drugs and all is a Jekyll and Hyde show, and how we perceive ourselves and how other people actually view us when we're doing things like this, and how it affects like Keith was saying, how it could affect your in the home, your family.
Right.
And it's a tough thing to discuss because there's how you're brought up, how you think things are going, and how acceptable it is in social stand, like socially today, and how we make so many like excuses for it, and or how people think, oh well, it's really not that bad because well, I didn't black out. So it's one of those things that we always have to think about the temptation. And and I mean, with alcohol, I mean, it's gotten me a black eye, a broken hand, a broken finger.
A
I
broken
had set my
hand? Really?
I set
You're
my
gonna have to go into that one later.
I've set my hair on fire. I blacked out and woke up in a different state. I mean, I fell through a glass table while blacking out. But also I've made many friends socially. A lot of I met my wife in a bar. I mean, you know,
Well, that's a story that a lot of people can tell, and that's not. I don't see that at all as a problem. A
but
lot
I
of
mean,
people will say that,
yeah, I mean, it's a social, mental, and genetic thing because, I have alcoholics on both sides, and I think everybody is their own person. But at the same time, people say, well, if it's in your family, and I got it on both sides, and, you know, uh, I don't know. Like Keith was mentioning, and I guess you also alluded to, well, said in the thing that marijuana. I don't want to just like pick on that or anything, but just the idea of that it's legal. I don't know if it necessarily makes it right because anything that takes you out of your state of mind, you know, whether it's alcohol or drugs, then I mean, we really should weigh the issues more heavily than what the tax money is going to bring in. I mean, I understand if people have issues with either disability or pain, then all right, well that's a little bit different. But as a recreational use, I mean, all these things, we really need to. It's hard to just like see how. Well, people don't want to see how it actually affects people. They just want to know how we're going to save money, how we're going to profit off this, which goes into marketing, which drugs don't at this point have any marketing behind them, I don't think. But I mean, the alcohol industry is just like ridiculous, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Well,
And, well, I just mean that, only more recently have we started like tagging movies with, oh, it contains alcohol, contains smoking, you know. But in the past, it never has, and it actually been like glamorized, and like a lot of our dad heroes coming home from work, Al Bundy, drinking a beer, Simpsons stuff, you know, that constantly kids are reminded that hey, it's okay to come home and have a drink. You had a bad day, have a drink, and getting caught into that, is just a dangerous trap.
I would wholeheartedly agree. if you go back in time to the 1960s and 70s, we were able to prove with a lot of court cases and Senate hearings and all that, that the tobacco industry went out of its way to addict its consumers to its product.
Right.
And the alcohol industry is no different, but for some reason we haven't prosecuted them for it. We have a nation of, I was almost going to say a nation of alcoholics. That's not true. We have a nation full of people, many of which are either alcoholics or in danger of that. And yet we don't regulate the use of alcohol the way we regulate the use of tobacco. Now, granted, one is tobacco is far more deadly, obviously, than alcohol. But it is really, I think that the alcohol industry, I don't think we regulate it nearly as much as we do. We don't.
No, not that statement. The statement that tobacco is more deadly than alcohol. Absolutely not.
Well, I mean, there are arguments to be made either way on that. You know, tobacco is directly linked to many forms of cancer, and
So is alcohol.
And is alcohol really related to cancer?
Yes.
That's not even talked about in the mainstream, so almost nobody knows that, and therefore we don't hammer on alcohol the way we hammer on tobacco. I think we're 50 years away from a society where eventually alcohol will be shunned the way tobacco is now.
No, it absolutely, there are absolutely links to, similar links that are linked to, that tobacco is linked to, are linked to alcohol. One of the things that tobacco doesn't affect that highly of that alcohol, as where tobacco will affect your lungs, alcohol can affect your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, your heart disease it's a contributing factor to heart disease. They're sure of that now. Diabetes. You can absolutely become, alcohol can cause a diabetic issues, all kinds of things. It's a lot of the, and several of the things that tobacco has been pointed out as, there's links to alcohol as well. It's something that that when you have an issue, thank you, when people have an issue with either or tobacco or alcohol, with an addiction, it isn't something that you want to talk about. It isn't something that you want to discuss. But when you get sober, you realize when you talk to people who are going through issues, besides from the issues of, like Doug was discussing, and like I went through, there are a lot of hidden dangers with alcohol that you don't hear about unless you have an addiction, and then they pound that in your head and you realize it pretty quickly how truly dangerous alcohol really is.
So, and why is that? Why is it that we have a society that, okay, scientifically we recognize that the dangers of both smoking and drinking are relatively equivalent in different ways, and yet the tobacco industry has these harsh warnings on the side of their packaging, and they have the sin tax is enormous. And if you go to the side of the alcohol, there's no warning labels.
Yes, there is.
Tax.
Look at your bottle. Look at your bottle. Absolutely, there are.
Well, it doesn't stand out. It doesn't stand out like, and it doesn't get talked about like cigarettes do. You know, if it's there,
oh, they are on there. Absolutely.
Yeah. but not like Keith is saying. They're not called out like.
No,
you
they're
know,
not in. No, they're not in big black, big white boxes with black writing on top of it. But there are warning labels on a bottle of alcohol.
And considering that the warning labels are coming and the size of them and all are all dictated by the government. The government isn't dictating that Budweiser has to put
Bingo.
a thing on it.
But no, look at your can of Budweiser. There are warnings.
I know, but not to the size and all and extent.
I can't look at a can of Budweiser because I would never drink that piss. Sorry.
All right, I just commonly
Go get a bottle of beer out of your fridge if you have one.
I don't have any.
I have plenty of, and I know.
But it's only. But you got to. But if you're talking a bottle from the 1970s, they're not on there. 1980s.
No, I don't have those either.
I did, but anyway. Now I do want to bring up another point that was mentioned. Marijuana. One of the things that marijuana is being used for now is to wean opioid addicts off of drugs and off of addiction.
Interesting, makes sense.
I think the addictions in this country largely are go unchecked, and that's because of they are addictions that are caused by legal drugs that are sold by manufacturers, and it's the money that they bring in why they aren't regulated as heavily as they should be. And I'm talking your opioids, alcohol. That's why, but yeah, they're using marijuana. That's one of the things they are using marijuana for now, is to wean people off of opioid addictions. So it's part of the argument for recreational legalization by many. The benefits of marijuana. Clearly, marijuana is a drug, but it's becoming known that it's a drug that has more of some of the benefits that it has more benefit. It's more beneficial than it is hurtful at points. But clearly, you can, no matter what anybody says, you can be addicted to marijuana. You can get addicted to marijuana. I mean, yeah, you pretty much, if they say they're not, that's kind of bullshit. Now, as for one of the issues with LeBron's son that is overlooked a little bit is the fact that LeBron's son himself is a very good basketball player. I mean, he's eventually, there's going to be comparisons to his father. He could very well be on that level. But a problem with that is at 15 years old, when he posts the biggest problem, besides from being only 15, with it being legal in California, that's the biggest problem. The second biggest problem is posting the video. So now he kind of has a little bit of a bullseye on his back at 15 years old for at least having dabbled in that. Now there could be schools who may be looking at him and kind of go, oh no, maybe we shouldn't, because there could
wait a minute, wait. You got to be kidding me. There isn't a school in this country that would care that he did that. They would all salivate at the concept of having him as one of their students and players. No. Money talks. Absolutely money talks. There isn't a school that would back off of him. Not
right, but what Jason is saying, it can happen because my neighbor has a state champion wrestling kid, and he was getting all kinds of scholarships and all, and guess what? He got busted with drugs, and guess what went away? All those scholarships.
Right, but he's not LeBron James' son.
No, I know. Yeah, yes, but right. But what Jason's saying could happen. But yeah, you're right. It's not LeBron James. Yes, son.
Right. Now, as for dealing with this, it was dealt with pretty much similar to the situation Keith went through, and with the way it sounds, Chad went through with me, with alcohol at least, and to an extent, I don't know. Knowing what I know now, I might handle that a little differently. That it could be something that I would frown upon personally, but I'm also of the mindset of most people are going to dabble in that at around, I would say more or less between the ages of, I think it's a little young on the one end, saying 14, and 17 is probably the age where most people will try one, the other, or both. Would be around that age bracket. So I'm not going to be surprised if it happens, but what I would prefer it to be in my presence with my knowledge. That's for sure. But kids are kids. They're going to experiment with, like we've talked about sex before. It's not that we can't control. They're going to make their own decisions no matter what we say. But you hope they use the knowledge we've given them to make that decision. I mean, I hope that my kids don't travel down the path that I did, because it's. I said it yesterday, and it's not the easiest thing to talk about. I said it yesterday in a meeting. The road to ruin is long. The road to redemption is a hell of a lot longer and a hell of a lot rougher. It's a bumpy road. But somebody said to me, said a few weeks ago that it's better to take that roller coaster ride than flatline. So yeah, like I said, it's something I don't wish on anybody. What I've been through, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Simply put, yeah, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But I can't pound in their heads too much, because it's going to be, hey, well, look what you did. Don't do as I say, do as I do. Don't do as I do, do as I say. But the likelihood is they're not going to listen to me. I just hope that we can give them enough knowledge to go into life that they'll make the right decision for them. The first time I got drunk outside of my house was at my friend's house, and it was handled, fine. Normally, of pretty much don't do it again. And actually, I didn't. I would only with my family, usually at my parents' house, when I was underage. I didn't even try. Never had a fake ID. Never would have tried to get one, anything like that. And anything else, I mean, Yeah, I was of age really. I didn't really drink all that much after the age of 17, uh, underage. And I think really the only time that I did, and it wasn't to the point of any point of blacking or anything like that, was at my sister's wedding, and I was 20 years old. So it surely wasn't something that weighed too heavy in my life either. Underage drinking. Um, it had a bearing, but not anywhere near what it was like um, when I was of age. So
Yeah, well, I was thinking that there's like a couple theories, like you were saying, being responsible, let's say, as a parent, allowing kids to drink in your house, which has a very dangerous thing,
sure,
kids,
sure.
other people's kids. Although, growing up when we were kids, it wasn't such a big deal if you had
Other people's kids.
kids drinking underage, but now it could be a serious issue, you know, having kids drink. And then there's also let's not drink in the house, but you wind up at friends' houses, at those parties in the woods. For us, it was at the beach. As a kid, I was like 13 at my cousin's house, and my older cousin Billy, who was, probably in his 30s at that time, he took us out fishing, and guess what? We sat around and drank beers while fishing, and it just everybody knows in the town, like in Lawrence Harbor, for where I grew up, there was a guy called Wayne Brower, Wayno. Wayno was an alcoholic. He would be found at the gas station trying to bum cigarettes. And if he wasn't there, where was he? Behind the liquor store.
Yeah.
And for like $7, you give Wayne $7 and he'd come back out with a bottle of Mad Dog or some Budweiser. He'd get his $2 and take your $5, and you'd
Yeah,
go down to the
not kidding.
jetty. You go down to the jetty and you'd hang out with your friends and drink. I worked at a gas station, and on Route 9, and I worked with this guy who had hair like Jerry Lee Lewis, and we did the overnight, and he was with the night train, and on those cold nights we'd swig half a bottle each and work. And
Right.
these are things that but I grew up in a house where it was not in my house. There's no, my parents don't drink. Well, they drink now more than ever, but growing up, we never saw a drop in the house. They didn't drink. They were very religious. And we still believe that, anything that takes your mind off of, let's say, God or out of your own conscious, then it is a problem, I guess, that
Right.
these types of things, and not dealing with your facts of what is causing this is one of the bigger problems. And I don't know, I just kind of got lost in my own thoughts, but I also was thinking about how this is going to go. And two issues here is like the pandemic and loneliness and people drinking, as well as on the same other side of that coin is that as as we all know with Facebook and all, we can all make jokes about it and show stadiums full of alcoholics and hey, yeah, that's funny, and uh, but at the same time, it is a real problem, You, I mean, I have a whole group, just one of my high school friends called Drinking with Joe, and what do we do? That's all we do is post pictures and or drink with Joe, you know.
Right. You're saying that. You mentioned the stadiums and loneliness. Actually, it's a really good, really good point. Um, you could be in a stadium full of people, or you could be, and I've done this, and so has my sponsor, where he's told me that told stories that he used to host these parties, and how he'd be the life of the party and be the loneliest fucker in the room.
Interesting.
And someone else I know said he would go to the Giants games and feel like he was standing there alone. Feel like he was completely alone. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm sure that in this COVID time, they're actually, I mean, I see it now. You're going to see a spike in addiction treatment over the next, if it has started already. There's going to be a spike in addiction treatment coming. Now, you mentioned another point you brought up, Doug, and this is, I don't know if you know this story, but up in Lake Wallenpaupack area, there was a girl who they were drinking, and she also was underage for having a license and drove a car and killed a couple of people, a couple of her friends. Just not far from you, maybe 45 minutes, an hour away. And yeah, that's one thing. That's one thing. I mean, to me, my kids doing it in the house is one thing, but somebody else's kids, no, that's going to be where, no, it's good. If it ever happened, it's going to be under my watch. So I agree with you 100% there. That's an issue I wouldn't touch at all. Even, then now, no, it's just something that, even if it's okay with the other kid's parents, no, I agree with you 100% there.
So I have a story to tell too. You're sort of triggering some stuff for me, and I think about it a lot. But my kids sort of know some of this, but not necessarily all of it. But you talked about being alone in a crowded room, and that certainly I remember those days well. When I was in grade school and high school, I was one of the classic nerds. Like, I was totally a geek. I dressed funny. I had big glasses. I had big teeth, pre-braces and all that. And I still have big teeth. But I didn't have very many friends and all that. And when I graduated high school, I was sort of reborn. I got to get away from what I thought was a really bad environment with a lot of people who were just assholes. And I got to go to college. But in between, in fact, only 11 days after I graduated high school, my father died. And that set me off on this dizzying spin into oblivion, if you will. The first day I remember, other than my 14-year-old dalliance with champagne, first day I got a taste of alcohol was my graduation party. Not mine, but I went to one. And then literally 11 days later, my father dies. I go to Brookdale for my first year, trying to stay home, but I'm not seeing straight. I'm in this perpetual state of mourning. And I discover alcohol. I discover my friends Brad and Tony and Neville and a bunch of other people, and we all start drinking. But I'm always feeling like I'm alone. And eventually I start going to bars by myself, which was like, what the hell am I doing? But I never slowed down. So from the age of 18 until what wound up being roughly 24, 5, maybe even 6, I don't think I ever fell into the category of being alcoholic, but I was doing things that were stupid constantly. And for me, part of that was drinking alone, going out and literally going to a bar and sitting there by myself, even when the room was crowded. But when I went to college, hold that thought, I'll be right with you. When I went to college, I went from being the nerd who had very few friends to being this insanely popular person with tons and tons of people around me. And yet I continued to feel like I was alone. And so that window from 18 to 20 mid 20s, we'll call it, was full of drinking heavily, and a lot of it had to do with my failure to properly process my father's death, but some of it had to do with not being able to grasp who I had become,
Right.
the coil of the bullshit I had to deal with in grade and high school, and becoming part of society where I had lots of friends and I was a very social person. And it sort of shapes who I am now and how I've raised my kids, because I remember those days I can think back to, like, oh my God, I sat in a bar by myself and I was just drinking alcohol. Why would you do that? To me, and Doug, you used the word before, alcohol is a social tool. It's not a purpose. It's like, I shouldn't go out there and just have a drink. It facilitates interaction with people. People get together. It's what friends do together. It's not something you necessarily do to get drunk. It's something you do to just liven
So
up the room, whatever. And
yeah.
I totally lost sight of that. Jason, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You answered my question. You just answered my question just by saying that. I know the answer. You would go in the bar and just sit there and
Yeah.
not say a word to anybody in a crowded bar.
I remember one of my brothers coming just to down to Long Branch, because I used to do it down on the the Long Branch area a lot. I remember one of my brothers coming down there several times and finding me in bars and saying, "Do you think you want to cool this off and come home?" And he was never able to retrieve me. And he and I still talk about that. I mean, that was a long time ago. He and I still
Right.
talk about that to this day. That my mother used to send him out to try to pull me back, and for a long time he couldn't. But it shapes who I am now, because I have a very firm rule that says I will never drink alone. No matter what, I haven't, every now and then I'll have something to drink. I'll have a beer, I'll have a glass of wine or something like that. But if I'm not with other people, I will not do it. I have an ironclad rule, and I've shared that with my kids. Not the whole history behind it, but they know that I think it's a social tool rather than something you do by yourself.
But the other person doesn't have to be drinking. Somebody just has to be there, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, in fact, my rule is so ironclad that I won't drink even if the other person is not drinking. It's either both, or other people in the room are drinking, or I
got
don't.
it. Okay, right. That's a very good rule.
Well, I just, the memories of what I was doing in my 20s. I mean, I didn't just go to bars and sit there by myself and drink. Well, how do you think I got home? So I did a lot of stupid shit.
I think I know.
Yeah.
I think I understand.
So I'm particularly sensitive about that sort of thing too. I've been fortunate that I haven't lost any friends who are close to me from drinking and driving, but I know plenty of people who have lost friends who are close to them. I'm probably talking to two of them right now. I mean, almost everybody's been touched in some way or another, but I think I horrified myself so much with my own behavior that, that's life's experiences will then take you to, how do I talk to Justin and Jeremy? But what do I talk to them about?
Right.
And they know some of that. They don't know all of it, I don't think, but they know some of it. And I'm sure the rest of it wouldn't surprise them based on how I talk a lot about it being a social tool as opposed to something and I've talked about it, this is something that I never ever would do alone, and I recommend the same for them. And I don't think Justin's the type. I mean, I get the sense that Justin drinks at school a lot, but I think he always does it with his roommates and his friends.
Yeah, I mean, just not to continue to beat up on it. I mean, like you were saying, it is a social thing, and a lot of business transactions happen around alcohol, whether it's for a reason or not. I mean,
And golf.
A lot of times I've got out, and when signing advertising contracts or whatnot, they're, hey, you want a drink or something? Yeah, sure, So, or a lot of our trade show things used to be big events, like would bring everybody together. Hey, let's do it on a boat with a bar,
Right. Mm-hmm.
And there's also a great feeling that brings back a lot of memories to me, as well as, even me just going down into town with my wife, and having a couple drinks. But, when you go in there and you sit at that stool and you order that drink, and other people in the town come and say hi to you, and they know your name, and you get up and play and force people to listen to your music in an awesome jukebox. It's a feeling, and even the nostalgia of remember what it is like to go out to a bar and being smoke filled even brings back different memories. you
Sure.
know
Oh, I agree
and
with you.
yeah, and so that was just like a different like take on some of our experiences. And like I was saying, I got tons of stories, and a lot of them were great. And like I said, I met a lot of friends in bars that I'm still friends with. And like I said, I met my wife and stuff. And yeah, but the other thing is that I don't think gets talked about a lot is memory loss, and
I
how
have no
that
idea what you're talking about. Oh, wait a
I'm friggin' clueless. I have no idea.
minute.
and how it eats
Memory loss?
away and turns off different parts of your brain. The I don't know really about the drug effects, but we know alcohol definitely does. And I don't really think that many people really talk about that. I don't even know if I know much except that I could see it in myself, I guess.
The most commonly asked question in college should be, Professor, can you explain this? Or I'm not sure if I understand that concept. Could you help me with it? But the most commonly asked question, I think, in college was, I did that? Because I didn't remember it.
See, you know what? No, for me, absolutely not. No, I commuted and really didn't hang around up there very often, very much. It was only a couple of
It's
times.
safer. It's safer to commute. Let me tell you something. So when you're not, I had off-campus apartments. I never lived on campus, but even off campus, I was close enough. So I was always at the frat parties and always at the guys' parties and this and that.
Never went to one.
Oh yeah, and I guarantee you, and that's part of what I talk about. The stupid stuff that I remember. It's not just how I got home afterwards, but it was also becoming a piece of furniture in the middle of a party because I was so obliterated I couldn't even see straight.
Right, right.
And that happened more than I'd like to admit, far more than I'd like to admit. I so and with becoming a piece of furniture, you have the memory of a piece of furniture too. So you wake up the next morning and you get told stories about stuff that you did, and you're like, I did that. And I had a few of those nights that. Listen, I always thought of it was part of the college experience, if you will.
Right.
I'm not so sure in retrospect that was probably a good way of looking at it. But, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, especially because I'm the old fart here. And when I was 18 years old, it was legal to drink when you were 18 years
Right.
old.
Right.
So my whole college experience was a just crazy amount of intoxication.
Sure.
I never had to fake it, when my son's 21 now, but I'm sure there was alcohol available when he was 18, 19, but he just couldn't buy it, so
Right.
I'm sure I tamped down some of his interaction early on.
The thing about that, Keith, and I'll say this, you realized at a certain point that college was over. There's people who don't. And that's where the problem usually starts. Not even, it doesn't end there. Believe me, it doesn't end there. The more I see, the more I learn. Sometimes it doesn't end for a very long time. I'll tell you, the meetings that I go to, I'm one of the younger people in the group. At 41 years old, and in the program, I'm still one of the younger people in the group. At 41, there's people that are into their 60s and 70s that are, and some of them have less time than I do. So it's yeah. it's scary. And it is very, it takes some people a very long time to leave the college party, so to speak, because that is where it starts. And I've heard it more than once, that's where it starts. And it takes a hell of a lot longer than your 20s and 30s to end that party.
Well, I think the advantages, and I'm sure you've talked about this a lot in meetings and such, there are some people who are more predisposed to this than others. And
Right.
so for some people, it's easier to become quote unquote an alcoholic than it is others. And perhaps for whatever reason, I'm not as predisposed. So I was able to sort of shake the coils of it and walk away.
Right.
As fortunate and, live with that specter. Even no matter how successful they are, it still hangs over them and it's still part of who they are. For me, I could make a conscious choice and I was done. And so even recently when I decided that I was getting too fat and I decided that I needed to change my diet, even a basic thing like that, I could literally remove all the alcohol from the house and not even blink an eye. I used to have 2 or 3 beers a week very recently until a couple months ago, 2 or 3 beers a week or, a mixed cocktail or something like that. Never, whatever. And when I made the choice to go on a diet when the boys went to school, I just made sure it was all gone. Everybody is that blessed to be able to make such an easy choice. So I consider myself very fortunate in that.
Well, I mean, I didn't expect this to go the way it did. But yeah. It's still a touchy subject. I don't know if you can tell, I'm sitting here with my arms folded and my foot tapping. So 4 months on, it's still has its moments where it's hard to talk about.
I don't think that's going to change for a long time, my friend, but that's why we're here with you.
No, and I'm seeing more and more that maybe one day it probably would be might be a good idea to go into personal experiences with it for all of us to talk about. I think we've gone in a totally different direction than we expected to, but I think it's the direction we all needed. And I think it's a direction we may all continue to need for a while. But going back to where we were going, I'll ask a question before, and then we'll kind of leave it here for now and come back to this later. Do you think, did Keith in your case, Doug in your case, do you think that your experiences made it harder or will make it harder to talk to your children about drugs and alcohol?
I'll take that first, and the answer is absolutely no. It's quite the opposite. If I hadn't woken up when I was 26 and 25, whatever, mid-20s, and figured out what I was doing and not walk away from alcohol intake, but treat it in a lot better way, I wouldn't even be here. Firstly, I would have killed myself.
Yeah.
Not through suicide, but through abuse, personal abuse.
Wow.
I wouldn't have even survived. And there wouldn't be sons. So I'm very consciously aware of how I sort of radically changed my life when I started to treat the subject with the respect it needed. And to that extent, along with other things that have happened to me in my life, I think it's allowed me to learn how to talk about stuff more freely. And for years I was doing that with my friends. And then it was very easy when the boys started becoming older to start talking to them about that too. So like I said, I don't think Justin and Jeremy know everything about, every story. Like, I know they don't know every story about my heretic days in college and such, but I have no problem talking to them about it. And I've always said to Justin, and Jeremy knows the same thing, even though he's just now coming of age. If they ask me a question, I'm never going to avoid it.
Right.
And now that they're both legal adults, I feel perfectly comfortable having these conversations. I think Jeremy would probably look at me and say, Dad, I don't want to hear it. But not because he's trying to avoid it. I think he has an image that, maybe I didn't do these things and he doesn't want to hear that I did. But I feel very comfortable because I did those things, being able to reflect back on them, because I think that sharing our experiences is so important for them, our kids. They need to know what we've learned and what we've experienced and what has come of it, so that they can make educated choices. Not that I can direct their choices, but that they can make educated choices. So everything I've done has helped me much more than it's hurt me talk to my kids.
Right. Doug?
Yeah, it's one of those tough things where it's like, we've said a lot of negative things today about we just discussed about the issues and the grips of addiction. And it's not something that obviously anybody wants any of their children. And you could be fearful of that. And you could say, hey, you're not going to do this. And, and that's one way to go. And then the other way is like, well, you could do this responsibly. And maybe this might be your outcome,
Right.
And for us, we believe with the church, you shouldn't be intoxicated, which I think all people believe that, is the thing. But it's so easy, you go out, you have a couple drinks, and that's it, The problem is my own actions, and I could say this all I want, but my own actions and my kids seeing me within the house, having a couple beers, mostly on most weekends, doesn't explain that very well, and how should you be? Well, every individual is different, and like we said, even socially, where it's like I go out, and I'm mowing the lawn, and my next door neighbor, it says, "Hey, Doug, man, how you doing? How's your week going? All right, why don't you come over? Let's have a beer." And that happens almost every week. And going the other way, going into the garden, and my next door neighbor says to me, "Hey, do you want a beer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And that happens, quite often, And even in the evening, the kids are all outside playing, and we have, neighborhood kids. And where do we gather? We gather, in the street. And usually it's met around a couple beers. So, it's hard to explain to your kids about all the issues that alcohol brings. And at the same time, multiple times a week, you're outside having a beer,
Right. But
So,
there's a difference. There, as we know, there's a difference between that and an addiction.
And I'd go beyond that too. And that is that there's a difference between going to bars and going to big parties and then driving home and things like that. You're actually showing your kids responsible alcohol intake. I'm doing it at the house. I'm doing it in the backyard.
There you go. There you go. That was my point.
And we're all walking home. I want, you're constantly reminding them, hey, nobody's got car keys here. Nobody's got other responsibilities here. No, I think that, yeah, I mean, it does seem kind of funny that every week you're drinking in front of them, but there are ways to paint it in a way that can be very positive and educational.
Right, right. A lot of the times when there's that situation, and then it's a situation where you're the life of the party, but or in that situation where you do that, and then you turn around and let's say I just gonna say this just to say it because sometimes this is the case. But then you go to the bathroom and do a line, or you go into the garage and take a big swig out of that bottle, 100 proof, or you'll have, you'll finish off a liter of vodka on top of that. That's where the issue comes. And that is sometimes where you have to face you have to face the animal at that point. But like you said, Doug, going out into the street and having a couple of beers with your neighbors, that's something else. Yeah, that is, to Keith's point, if you're going to educate on something like that, that's okay. That is okay. But when it becomes, you'll know, because you'll wake up the next morning and know that you've crossed the line. And in some cases, crossed the line way too many times. I think that's a pretty good spot to. It's maybe not the best spot to lead this conversation, but because this clearly has left us open to what is probably going to be a continuing conversation. First off, because clearly there's a bit of a bigger book here that we've got to write for all of us. And there's also one element that isn't with us who we haven't heard the fourth side of the story. And I have a feeling it probably is a very interesting story on his side as well. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Great show. And we will see you next week. Take care, everybody.